The galaxy had long been a realm of tranquility, ruled by powerful alien civilizations that had forged peace through centuries of careful diplomacy and mutual respect. To them, the humans of Earth seemed like a curious anomaly, strange, unpredictable, and yet oddly fragile. Earth had known its fair share of wars, battles that had scarred the planet and almost destroyed its inhabitants. Yet, the aliens watching from the stars viewed humanity's history as one of fear and division, a species constantly torn by conflict but too scared to ever rise above it. The Galactic Council, an assembly of the galaxy's greatest minds, had concluded long ago that humans, though intelligent, were fundamentally afraid of war. They believed that humanity's wars were a sign of weakness, a species unable to confront the true power of the galaxy's dominant empires. The Council's greatest mistake was thinking that humans were timid, that they cowered behind their battles of the past, learning nothing from them but fear. Little did they know, they were completely wrong. The Council watched Earth from a distance, intrigued but always skeptical. To them, humans seemed caught in a cycle of conflict, incapable of learning from their past. The media that the Council received from Earth was filled with images of violence, wars fought between nations, devastating political upheavals, and the rise and fall of governments. The people of Earth appeared to be endlessly at war with one another, incapable of achieving lasting peace. The Council's assumptions about human weakness grew over the centuries as they studied Earth's history from the comfort of their starships. They saw Earth's wars as endless cycles of failure, never realizing that each conflict brought about a unique form of resilience. Instead, they viewed humanity's inability to settle disputes peacefully as a fatal flaw. The Jora, one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, were particularly adamant about this theory. Known for their intellect and calm nature, the Jora had never known war. They had evolved into a species that valued knowledge, peace, and understanding, and they had built a reputation as the galaxy's greatest diplomats. It was from this belief in their own superior wisdom that the Jora felt justified in offering the people of Earth a place among the stars. They had no idea what was about to happen. On Earth, something extraordinary was unfolding. Hidden in the deepest reaches of Earth's space, a project had been underway for years, so secretive that even the most advanced alien technology had failed to detect it. Humanity was preparing not just for peace, but for something far more dangerous: readiness for war. For centuries, humans had fought amongst themselves, but each battle, each loss, had only made them stronger, more determined, more resilient. The scars of war were not the end of humanity's story. They were the beginning of something greater. Deep in the heart of Earth's military, engineers and scientists were working tirelessly to build a ship that would change everything. This ship, codenamed Phoenix, was not just a vessel for exploration or defense. It was the embodiment of humanity's strength, its refusal to bow down to any force, no matter how powerful. The Phoenix was designed to be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was faster than light, able to travel distances in the blink of an eye, and equipped with weapons that could tear through the shields of even the most advanced ships. But the true strength of the Phoenix lay in its ability to adapt, to outsmart any opponent, and to fight back when all seemed lost. It was not just a tool of war, it was a message. A message that humanity, despite all its failures and mistakes, would never back down from a fight. The Phoenix was ready to defend Earth, but it was also ready to take the fight to anyone who threatened the peace of their world. The Galactic Council, with its lofty ideals and assumptions, had completely misunderstood what it meant to be human. The first contact came as a shock. The Jora, believing themselves to be benevolent peacemakers, sent a ship to Earth to offer a diplomatic solution. The Jora fleet, sleek and majestic, carried the message of peace from the Galactic Council. Their leaders believed that humanity was ready to join the Galactic Alliance, that Earth's people had learned the lessons of their past, and would welcome the wisdom of their intergalactic neighbors. They couldn't have been more wrong. The Jora vessel, a shining example of advanced engineering, arrived in Earth's space without warning. Its purpose was clear: to bring humanity into the fold, to offer a peaceful future beyond the conflicts of their troubled past. The Jora, with their superior intellect, believed that humanity would gladly accept their message. They didn't anticipate the sharpness of the response they would receive. Commander Alana Steele, captain of the Phoenix, had been watching the Jora vessel approach. She knew what was coming. She knew the message they would bring, and she was ready to answer. The humans of Earth had faced enough wars, enough threats to their survival, and now they stood on the cusp of something much bigger. They would not bend to the will of anyone, not even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. When the Jora ship made contact with Earth's communication systems, the message they received was nothing like they expected. The voice that answered them was calm, steady, but filled with authority. It was the voice of Commander Steele. "We don't need your peace," she said, her tone as cold as the void of space. "Stay out of our way." The Jora were stunned. They had expected gratitude, even awe. They had expected humans to bow before them, to beg for their wisdom and alliance. Instead, they were met with resistance. But Steele's words were only the beginning. The message from the Phoenix made it clear. Humanity did not fear the galaxy. Humanity was not afraid of war. Humanity had fought battles before, and if the Jora wanted to bring their fleet to Earth, they would see exactly what the humans were capable of. The Jora could not have known how close they were to misunderstanding humanity's true strength. They thought humans had feared war, but they were wrong. They didn't know that the years of conflict on Earth had prepared humanity for something far more dangerous than just survival. It had prepared them to stand against anyone who threatened their freedom. And they were about to find out just how powerful humans could be when they refused to back down. The stage was set. The peace the Jora had hoped to offer was slipping away, and the Phoenix was ready to make its mark on the galaxy. The Jora had no idea what they had just woken up. The message from Earth's commander, Alana Steele, echoed across the stars, leaving the Jora fleet speechless. At first, they thought they had misinterpreted the transmission. Surely, the humans were still coming to terms with the peace they were offering, weren't they? The idea that Earth's inhabitants would reject the opportunity for intergalactic alliance was unthinkable to the Jora, who had spent centuries perfecting diplomacy, and who prided themselves on their ability to bring even the most warring species into peaceful coexistence. But here, in the cold silence of space, they faced an unexpected defiance, a message not of gratitude, but of challenge. "We don't need your peace. Stay out of our way," the human voice had said, and it hung in the air like a declaration of war. To the Jora, the message carried an undeniable weight. They had underestimated the humans, and now they had to face the consequences. For years, the Jora had studied Earth, observing its troubled past of wars and internal strife. The events of Earth's history, the wars fought over resources, ideologies, and territorial control, had painted a picture of a species constantly at odds with itself. The Jora's belief was that humanity, battered by its own violent history, had no desire to repeat the mistakes of the past. They had assumed that humans would seek peace above all, that they would see the wisdom of the Jora's offer to join the greater galactic alliance. They were wrong. Commander Steele's message was not a simple rejection. It was a warning, a clear statement that Earth would not be subjugated. The Jora could no longer pretend that humanity was weak or afraid. The response they received was not from one human, but from an entire species that had endured unimaginable hardships and had learned to thrive in the face of adversity. The humans had been pushed to the brink, again and again, but each time, they had risen from the ashes, more determined and stronger than before, and now they stood ready. not to embrace the peace the Jorah offered, but to challenge them. The Jorah couldn't quite grasp it. Earth had been a chaotic world, one racked by wars and violence. Yet it seemed that every time humanity fell, it came back, not just surviving, but growing. Something had shifted over the centuries. Humanity, in its infinite resourcefulness, had learned to fight with everything it had, against the odds, against the invincible, against the seemingly unstoppable. Now, they had become something much more than a peaceful species. They had become a force that would not be easily pushed around. The Phoenix, the flagship of humanity's newfound resolve, was the symbol of that transformation. It wasn't long before the Jorah realized that their message had been more than just a diplomatic mission. It had been a miscalculation. The humans weren't a people who had grown tired of war. They were a people who had learned its cost and its consequences. They had lived through pain, destruction, and loss. But through it all, they had become experts at surviving, even thriving. And now, that survival instinct was being honed into something far more dangerous. The Phoenix was not just a ship, it was the embodiment of that survival, a weapon unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The Jorah were not prepared for this reality. They had been watching Earth for centuries, assuming that they understood the humans better than anyone else. Yet here, in the cold vacuum of space, they were faced with something that no amount of observation had prepared them for. The humans weren't afraid of them. They weren't afraid of war. The fear that the Jorah had so readily projected onto Earth's people was a fear of the Jorah's own making. It was the Jorah who feared what would happen when humanity was finally pushed too far. And now, it seemed that the humans had made their own choice. They had rejected the Jorah's peace. The time for diplomacy had passed. The humans were ready for whatever came next. The Jorah leaders convened in a meeting chamber aboard their flagship. Their faces were grim, their minds racing with the implications of what had just occurred. The message from the Phoenix could not be ignored. A fleet of ships had already been dispatched to Earth in an attempt to convince humanity to accept their terms, to bring them into the fold. The Jorah's leadership debated their next steps. Should they back down? Should they send another message, this time with a greater show of force, hoping to intimidate the humans into submission? Or was it already too late? The voices of reason in the room argued for a peaceful resolution, urging caution. But the voices of the hardliners were louder, calling for a demonstration of power, an overwhelming force to make the humans see the futility of their resistance. The Jorah fleet, though, technologically superior, was not prepared for the ferocity of the humans' response. The Phoenix, a symbol of humanity's defiance, had not yet made its full move, but the entire galaxy could feel the tremors of its potential. It wasn't just a matter of advanced technology. Humanity had something far more valuable, something the Jorah had failed to recognize, a spirit that could not be easily crushed. This spirit had been forged through centuries of war, through the constant struggle to survive, and it had created a people who were not afraid of confrontation. The Phoenix was not just a ship, it was a declaration. It said that humanity would not be bowing to the will of any alien empire, that no matter how large or powerful their opponents were, the humans would fight for their right to stand free, as Imai. The Jorah fleet advanced. The humans on Earth watched with growing determination. They knew the stakes had been raised, but they were ready. Commander Steele, watching from the bridge of the Phoenix, understood the weight of what was happening. The Jorah believed that Earth was a species that feared the consequences of war. But Steele knew better. The wars of the past had only made humanity stronger, more capable of fighting for what was rightfully theirs. And now, humanity had built the Phoenix, a ship that would not just defend Earth, but send a message to the Pi. Stars. They were not afraid. The message from Earth had been clear, and now the Jorah had no choice but to face the reality of humanity's resolve. No longer would Earth be the weak, trembling planet caught in the crossfire of galactic politics. Humanity had rejected their peace. The Phoenix was ready to prove that they were prepared for anything, whether through diplomacy or through battle. The Jorah would soon learn that the humans they had underestimated were a force to be reckoned with. The real test was about to begin, and Earth was ready. The moment of confrontation arrived swiftly, more sudden than even the Jorah could have anticipated. The vast emptiness of space became the backdrop for the unfolding struggle. In the cold silence between stars, humanity was not cowering. They stood at the precipice, a proud species unbowed, prepared to meet the challenges that had come knocking at their door. The Phoenix, now fully operational, glimmered in Earth's orbit, a powerful symbol of defiance, ready to show the galaxy that Earth had no intention of succumbing to fear. Commander Alana Steele, standing at the helm, could feel the tension in the air, though none of her crew could sense the fear they expected. There was no hesitation in her actions, no uncertainty in her mind. This was no longer about diplomacy or negotiation. This was a statement. Humanity had reached the point where they would not be dictated to by any force, no matter how advanced or formidable. The Jorah fleet had arrived in full force, and their ships, sleek and imposing, filled the space surrounding Earth. These were the same beings who had looked down on humanity, certain that they would be welcomed with open arms. They believed they could intimidate the humans, that their centuries of technological advancement and diplomatic finesse would easily win them a place in the galaxy's new order. Yet, as they looked at Earth's fleet, they began to sense something different, a confidence in the humans' eyes that spoke volumes. The Phoenix, though not as large as the Jorah ships, was a masterpiece of human engineering. It had been built for one purpose: to demonstrate that humanity could defend itself, to show the galaxy that they were no longer a species to be taken lightly. As the Jorah fleet positioned itself around Earth, Commander Steele ordered the Phoenix to move forward, cutting through space with a grace and speed that caught the Jorah off guard. The ship's weapon systems hummed with anticipation, not yet activated but ready for anything. The Jorah leaders had underestimated the humans' resolve. They had thought their offer of peace would be enough to sway Earth's leaders, to bring them into the fold of galactic society without a second thought. What they failed to understand was that humanity was not simply interested in existing alongside other species. They wanted respect. They wanted autonomy. They wanted to shape their own destiny. As the Jorah fleet deployed its communication channels to establish a final line of dialogue, Commander Steele's voice resonated across the open space. "We've heard your message, and we've made our choice. Now, you need to hear ours," she said, her voice calm, unwavering. The challenge was clear. Earth would not be a subject under the Jorah's control. The Jorah responded, but the words that came through were heavy with condescension, a final attempt to soften the humans' resolve. "Your people are not prepared for what lies ahead," came the cold, measured voice of the Jorah diplomat. "You are weak, trapped by your history. You cannot hope to stand against us. Surrender now, and we will spare you." The silence that followed the message was almost unbearable, but Commander Steele's response was swift. "We are not afraid of war. You've underestimated us for too long. We'll fight to protect our people." As her words echoed through the comm system, the Phoenix fired its first shots, laser beams powerful enough to shatter the shields of the lead Jorah ships. The Jorah fleet, although technologically superior, was caught off guard by the sheer intensity of the humans' assault. The Phoenix was more than just a ship. It was a representation of humanity's survival instinct, a weapon forged from decades of struggle and resilience. The Jorah, so confident in their ability to intimidate and negotiate, now found themselves in the midst of a battle they had not expected. They had assumed that their technological advantage and superior numbers would be enough to overwhelm the humans, but the humans' tenacity, their refusal to back down, took them by surprise. The Phoenix tore through the Jorah fleet with a speed and ferocity that matched its captain's unwavering resolve. Every shot fired was a message, not just to the Jorah, but to every civilization watching from afar. Humanity was not a species that feared war. It was a species that fought when necessary, and it had learned from its past. The battle raged on for hours, a vicious exchange of firepower and strategy. The Jorah fleet began to realize the magnitude of their error. The humans were not intimidated by their strength, nor were they swayed by the power that the Jorah believed would guarantee their victory. The Phoenix moved through space with unparalleled agility, dodging incoming fire and retaliating with devastating precision. It was clear that this was no ordinary conflict. It was a clash of ideologies, a battle for the soul of humanity. The Jorah, despite their superior technology, lacked the one thing the humans had: an unbreakable will. The humans did not fight for victory alone. They fought for their right to be free, to govern themselves, to carve out their own place in the galaxy. They fought not just to protect their planet, but to protect their identity. The Phoenix was more than just a weapon. It was the embodiment of humanity's spirit, a spirit that could not be crushed by the cold logic of diplomacy or the ruthless efficiency of war. The battle took a sudden, decisive turn when the Jorah flagship, the Serenity, attempted to initiate a retreat. Their fleet, once so confident, had been decimated by the relentless assault from the Phoenix. Commander Steele, seeing the moment of weakness, ordered a final strike. A series of coordinated attacks disabled the Jorah flagship's engines, leaving it floating helplessly in space. The Jorah, in their panic, attempted to send out a final plea for peace, but it was too late. The humans had made their stand. The Phoenix had delivered the message loud and clear. Earth was not a weak, fearful species. The humans were no longer the people who would bow to any empire. They were a force that would fight and win on their own terms. As the Jorah fleet scattered, retreating to the farthest reaches of space, the crew of the Phoenix stood at the edge of victory. The battle was over, but the implications were only beginning to unfold. Humanity had proven that it was not afraid of war. It had embraced it, not as a desire for conquest, but as a means of defending everything they held dear. Earth was no longer a world that would quietly accept the will of others. It was a world that would stand firm, unyielding, in the face of any challenge. The galaxy, once so certain of humanity's fear, would now be forced to reconsider everything they thought. They knew about Earth. The message had been delivered. Humanity was no longer afraid, and the Phoenix was only the beginning. As the remnants of the Jorah fleet fled into the cold expanse of space, their retreating vessels left behind nothing but the scars of battle and the silence of stunned disbelief. The Phoenix, standing tall in the heart of Earth's orbit, had proven its worth in a way no one had expected. For centuries, the galaxy had considered humanity a species marked by its vulnerability, its fear of war and conflict, but that assumption had been shattered in the blink of an eye. The message humanity had sent was undeniable. They were no longer a weak, fragile species waiting to be protected by the hands of others. They had forged their strength through countless battles, through suffering, and through a willingness to fight for their survival. Now, the galaxy would have to learn to reckon with them. Commander Alana Steele stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, her gaze fixed on the retreating Jorah ships, though her mind was already looking beyond the immediate battle. The humans had not just won a skirmish in space. They had won something far greater. They had secured their place in the galactic order, not as passive participants but as active, powerful players. The Jorah, with all their centuries of experience and their superior technology, had been humbled by the sheer force of human will. Steele knew that this victory would send ripples across the galaxy, ripples that would eventually reach the farthest corners of the universe. The humans had proven something fundamental. They were not afraid. The crew of the Phoenix had seen the battle as more than just a test of firepower. It was a testament to humanity's resilience. The ship's systems had been pushed to their limits, and the crew had been tested in ways they never imagined. Yet, through every challenge, they had held firm. The Phoenix had been designed as a symbol of strength, but in the end, it was the spirit of the people aboard it that had made the difference. They fought not for glory or conquest, but to protect their home, to defend their people, and to ensure that no other species would ever dare look down on humanity again. In the aftermath of the battle, Earth had become the center of attention for the entire galaxy. News of the humans' unexpected victory spread quickly, faster than anyone could have predicted. The Jora, the once thought invincible diplomats of the stars, had been sent running, their pride shattered, their fleet in disarray. It wasn't just the Jora who were watching. Every empire, every civilization that had once thought of humanity as a primitive, fearful species now had to reassess their stance. The Phoenix had proven that Earth was no longer a planet to be ignored or dismissed, but Commander Steele knew that this battle, though significant, was not the end. The Jora would regroup, they would lick their wounds, and they would return. The question wasn't whether they would come back, but when. What would the next confrontation look like? Would humanity's defiance have lasting consequences, or would the galaxy soon return to its assumptions about Earth's place in the stars? Steele turned to her crew, their faces marked by the exhaustion of battle, but also by a new sense of pride. Earth had stood firm, and the entire crew had played a part in that victory. But Steele knew that this victory wasn't just about the battle. It was about something more profound, a statement that humanity was capable of standing its ground in the face of overwhelming odds, and that they would never be subjugated again. The first few days after the battle were filled with communication from across the galaxy. Some came with offers of alliance and respect, others with threats and warnings, still others with a sense of confusion. The humans had shown themselves to be unpredictable, and that was a quality that many found unnerving. The galaxy was not accustomed to such a reaction from a species they had once dismissed. Steele and her team were bombarded with requests for meetings, discussions, and inevitably, negotiations. Some worlds sought to form alliances with Earth, hoping to secure their place alongside humanity in the galactic pecking order. Others sought to test the resolve of the humans, wondering whether this was just a fluke, a temporary victory against a weakened adversary. But the most concerning messages came from those who had feared the humans from the beginning. The more powerful empires who had considered Earth a stepping stone for their own imperial ambitions. The biggest challenge, Steele realized, was not just dealing with the Jora, who had now retreated into the far reaches of space to regroup. The real test would be the galaxy's reaction to humanity's newfound defiance. The next battle wouldn't be fought in the vacuum of space, but in the halls of diplomacy, where alliances would be tested and humanity's place in the galaxy would be determined. The Phoenix, though a symbol of strength, would not win this battle. It would be the will of the people, the resolve of humanity, that would ultimately decide whether they would stand as equals among the stars or whether they would be relegated to the fringes, forever regarded as an unpredictable, dangerous species. Alana Steele knew that the days ahead would be fraught with challenges. The human race had made its mark on the galaxy, but it would take more than just one victory to secure their future. They would need to prove that their defiance was not a reaction to a single enemy, but a core part of their identity. Earth would need to show that it wasn't just capable of surviving, it was capable of thriving in a galaxy full of powerful beings and ancient empires. It would need to demonstrate that its strength came not just from technology, but from the heart of its people, who would always rise when faced with adversity. And so, as the Phoenix drifted in orbit around Earth, the crew began to prepare for the next phase of their journey. The world below them had witnessed the birth of a new era. The humans who had once cowered in fear of war now stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy would have to adjust to this new reality, and Earth, for the first time in history, would no longer be the prey. Humanity had learned, through decades of war and conflict, how to fight, how to survive, and how to stand firm in the face of overwhelming odds. As Steele looked out at the vast expanse of space, she understood one thing. Earth had found its place in the stars, not through submission, but through strength. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humans were no longer afraid of war. They had embraced it, not for conquest, but for survival. And that made them a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy would have to learn to live with it.